So today we're talking about angle relationships. So this would be a video if you were absent or just need a little bit of extra explanation on angles. So that is what we covered today. So the things that you have to know, which need to be in your notes: complementary angles always add to 90 degrees. So you're going to have to learn that, memorize it, put it in your notes. Complementary angles add to 90. So you can have two angles next to each other that form a right angle, or you could have two separate angles that just add to 90. Supplementary angles always add to 180. So they could form a straight line. You could have this angle and that together make 180 degrees, or they could be two separate angles that add to 180. So complementary is 90, supplementary is 180. You've got to know that. Okay, let's talk about adjacent angles. So adjacent angles are two angles that are just smushed up next to each other. So they have a common side and a common vertex. So for example, if I look at just this angle right here, that's one of the angles. And then the one right next to it, this one, that shares that side and that vertex, that angle would be adjacent to that. So angle BOC and COA would be adjacent. Notice two of the letters are the same. They share that side. So that's adjacent. You need to know what adjacent means. A linear pair, this is really important, you'll see it all year. A linear pair forms a line. First of all, a pair is two, so it's two angles that form a line. So they have to be adjacent, which means they share that side, and they also have to add up to 180 degrees. So they're adjacent and supplementary. So angle 1 plus angle 2 would equal 180. If I were to name these angles, I would say angle SQR and angle SQP would be supplementary. SQR and SQP. Notice they share that side, so that makes them adjacent. And then they also add to 180. They form that straight line, linear pair. So that one's very important. Another one that's very important that you'll see all year are vertical angles. So vertical angles starts with the letter V. They make an angle and they are opposite each other. They are not adjacent. They do not share a side. So like for example, angle DAC, that angle right there, and angle BAE, those would be vertical. So they're opposite each other, and they make that V. So V on one side, V on the other side. So this angle and this angle. Also the top and the bottom are vertical. So DAB and CAE would be vertical. So those two angles are vertical angles. So they're opposite each other. Okay. So something very important to know is vertical angles are always equal to each other. So angles 1 and 3 would be equal, 4 and 2 would be equal. So this angle right here would be 80 degrees. That would make this angle 80 degrees. They always equal each other. Now I want you to notice something special. These two angles, 1 and 2, are right next to each other and they make a straight line. Those are called a linear pair. So they add to 180. So if you know that's 80, this would be 100, which would make that 100. So we've got some linear pairs and some vertical angles in there. Okay. So on your notes, you're going to go through these and you're going to try to figure out what matches. So like angles 1 and 2 right here would be vertical angles. Those would be vertical. Angles 1 and 2 here, they form a right angle, so those would be complementary. But I also want you to notice they share a side, so they are adjacent. These right here, angles 1 and 2, are not vertical. Those two make a straight line, so those are a linear pair. They also add to 180, so they're supplementary. They also share that side, so they are adjacent. These angles, angle 1 and angle 2, just share a side, so they're adjacent. They don't add to 90 or 180 or anything special. This is kind of hard to see. I wonder if I can move this. I can't. There it goes. Okay, so this one right here, I have angles 1 and 2. So these, angle 1 and angle 2, right here, those would be vertical angles. Vertical angles are never adjacent. Since these two angles are equal and they add to 90, because this is 90, that would make each of those angles 45 degrees. And we know that vertical angles are equal, so angle 2 would be 45 degrees, and 45 plus 45 is 90, so they would be complementary. And then these right here, these are vertical angles because they're opposite each other, but notice this box, that would make that 90 degrees. These two right here are a linear pair, so if that's 90, this would be 90, which would make angle 2 90. And 90 plus 90 is 180, so they are supplementary. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so naming angles, very, very important. So first let's try to name a pair of vertical angles. So vertical angles are opposite each other, and you have to name the angle, the V. So I would name like C, E, A would be an angle, and B, E, D. Those are vertical. So C, E, A, and angle B, E, D. Those would be vertical. But what about the other set? What about C, E, B, and A, E, D? Those would also be vertical. Okay, let's name a linear pair. So let me erase this. So a linear pair has to form a straight line. Straight line, so I look for a straight line, but it's two angles that create that straight line, and they're adjacent, so they share a side. So CEA and AED would be a linear pair. But there are lots. What about this straight line right here? I could say AED and DEB. And that's just a couple of examples, so hopefully that helps. I don't want this lesson to last all day. And here's just another example of that we go over in class. Okay, this is for your notes, so you can pause this and put this in your notes. Never assume lines are perpendicular. Perpendicular means they form a right angle in here. It might look like it, but unless you see that box, never assume lines are perpendicular. Also, there are other things you cannot assume. You can't assume that angles equal each other. They have to be marked with the humps in order for them to be equal. Like it might look like this angle and this angle are equal, but unless they have the humps, you can't assume it. Same with congruent. You cannot assume two segments equal each other. They have to be marked with the little slashy marks. Never assume a right angle unless you see the box. Now you can assume vertical angles. If it makes a perfect X, those angles are vertical. You can assume a linear pair. If it makes a straight line, it is a linear pair. And you can assume that angles are adjacent if they share a side. Okay, I think that's it. That's it for the first day. The assignment today is just all about vocabulary, so make sure you understand all that vocabulary. There is maybe a little bit, on this side, Make sure you know that complementary angles add to 90. So on that first section, these add to 90. So you would do 90 minus whatever angle that you're given. Supplementary angles add to 180. So 180 minus whatever angle that you're given. Linear pair adds to 180. So again, 180 minus whatever angle. And then that last section, it says numbers 5 and 6 are complementary. So 5 and 6 have to add to 90. And then 6 and 7 are supplementary. So they have to add to 180. So hopefully, if you have any questions, just ask.